Hello and welcome to this edition of Scottsdale's Yesterdays. You know, Scottsdale's history is rich with diverse and fascinating people, and the people who founded and built our city came not only from across the United States, but from around the world. And today we're going to speak with some very special guests from a pioneer Scottsdale family that traces its roots to China. The Song family has been part of Scottsdale since the 1920s. We'll talk about how the family came to America, found their way to Scottsdale, and prospered. Their stories also tell us about an experience of Asian American immigrants and their struggle to be accepted and to impact this country. Joining me today are John Song, the owner of Mexican Imports, located in one of our most historic buildings in downtown Scottsdale, and I'm sure those of you who've been in downtown are familiar with that building. And also joining us is John's sister, Eva Tang. Eva, welcome. A retired teacher, and like John, one of a select group of people who are actually native Arizonans. And also a friend and colleague in the city of Scottsdale, Jason Song, city employee and the family's unofficial historian. Right, Jason?
Yeah.
And Jason, I read the work that you've done, Ginger Roots, you called it, on the pre-Scottsdale history of the family. And I think it might be nice to kick this off by you telling us briefly how the Song family came from China and how its members ended up in Scottsdale, because it's a story of courage and resilience and hard work. And tell us a little bit about it.
Well, my grandfather was one of 5 brothers who was from a small village in China. He was actually the youngest of the 5 brothers, and all of them went out to earn their fortunes in various places. One of them went to Canada, one to Mexico. My grandfather got married before he left. He married a 15-year-old bride, and she lived with the other wives in the family home in China. And he went to China to help earn his way there. He could read and write Chinese, which was really quite an achievement then. One of the merchants in the town said, let me help you out. Let me get you to the United States so that you can start earning your way. And from being a scholar in China, he went to being a dishwasher in San Francisco and worked there. People who were his sponsors helped teach him English and helped him learn how to cook American food. And he went on and lived in the United States for about 8 or 9 years before he went back to China to get his wife. When he had left, they hadn't had any children or anything, but there was a nephew, the son of the oldest #1 wife, that his wife had taken care of for those 9 years and really had raised as her own. She had gone as far as chewing peanuts to feed him as baby food. I mean, that was her job as the lowest wife. And he gathered her up and they went back to San Francisco. And once again, they started over and were trying to build a new life there. And while they were there, a friend from the village stopped by in San Francisco and said, well, I'm on my way back. And they said, is there any way at all you can bring, my nephew? Because she had really raised him as her own. And we said, sure, I'll arrange for a sponsor and I'll see what I can do to bring him back. And actually the family was very happy for him to leave China, because there were a lot of bandits and a lot of bad things going on in China at that time. So they sent him on a ship all by himself with no other family members back to the United States, and he had to then move to Mesa where his sponsor was. Well, as soon as my grandfather and his wife could gather their stuff together, they moved back over to Mesa to be with him, because basically that was her child.
Yes, she more or less took him in as her own and adopted him, and he was closer to my mother than his own mother.
Now, did he change his name?
I don't believe, did he?
Yeah, he changed his name to...
As a respectful gesture toward the people that, in essence...
Who were his sponsors.
Were his sponsors.
And so that's why his name was Wall. And that's how he got to be called.
Well, and then many of the immigrants that came, they had to have family here, or have meet certain regulations, and so he would use someone else's name on his paper so he could enter the United States.
Now,
And that's very typical of the Chinese people that came here.
and facing the hurdles that they had to face.
Yes.
Well, then in Chandler, they opened up a store.
Right.
And tell us a little bit about that.
Well,
Well, my dad opened a store in Chandler, and they had dirt floor, and it wasn't a store, it was an old shack. And to store grain and stuff, he would dig a hole in the ground, and he would trade with the Indians, the Pima and the Maricopa, and he would bargain with them for wood and fuel. So he trade with the Indians, and then he learned how to speak Pima and Spanish, and that's how he got to be successful in the grocery business. So so his family was getting bigger, so he said, well, I need to move out to get a larger store. So then one of the salesmen came in and told him, he said, well, there's a nice looking store in Scottsdale. Why don't you come with me to take a look at it? So he came to Scottsdale with the salesman. First thing he looked at that white building, my dad fell in love with it. He said, this is it. He said, we're gonna move here. So move his whole family over here, and then what happened?
That's 1928, right?
Yeah,
Right.
down there. So
and the flour mill, the Tempe flour mill,
Right.
let them borrow a truck, put all their stuff, lock, stock, and barrel, one big move, and shipped and brought them back over to Scottsdale.
And another factor, too, I think that influenced his move to Scottsdale was because he was of a Chu family instead of Ong and Tang, which is more or less like the Tong, and there was somewhat resentment, and so he thought, well, it'd be good to move away and get started
So there was
someplace
some-
new.
is it
Friction.
friction and
yeah,
there.
Chinese had their own discrimination. If you wasn't a Ong or in the same group,
Uh-huh.
you were
Same.
an outcast.
So it's, so if it isn't one thing, it's another. huh?
That's it.
Let me put this into perspective then, that is this the store then?
Yes,
Yeah,
that
the
white
white,
building.
Okay, what was there before?
It was,
Pool hall.
it was empty.
Johnny Rose's. No,
Yeah.
that was Johnny Rose's pool hall.
Johnny Rose's Pool Hall, because
Yeah.
a year or so ago, we did a little tour, a little walking tour, a historical tour, and I couldn't recall for sure, so that was Johnny Rose's Pool Hall. That has a basement under it, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
a
Didn't
full
they do
basement under the
wrestling
whole building.
there, too?
Yeah.
Okay, and
Did-
that's right on the corner then of the Civic Center Mall today.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So,
Yeah, I was talking to this Mexican man. He passed away. Harvey, he was about 100-year-old once he passed away. He was telling me a story about that store. He said when he was a kid, John Rose would have a pool hall and they would have a dance hall. And his job was to get a wagon and go out on the farm to pick up the gals to bring in town. So, you know, they had a dance hall.
Uh-huh.
And that was his job. So, and then John Rose could,
that's
you
tough
know,
duty.
yeah. So, you know, he was telling me about that. And then this Indian man used to come into the store. He used to have a barber shop on top. And then Shirley Brown, when he was a kid, he used to own a drugstore in Scottsdale. He was projecting this inside the store. They had a movie theater in there, too. A barber shop, a movie theater, and
Sounds like this was the first multi-use cultural
That's
facility
it.
in
Yeah.
Scottsdale, right?
The center of all
yeah,
activity.
they had the pool hall down there and then a dance hall.
This is, yeah, sort of a long history story
Yeah.
then, right? I want also for people to get a sense of perspective, and we'll get back to the story, but I want them to see the people, because this photograph has your father,
Yes.
your grandfather. It has, this is you, John,
Yes.
and this is you, Eva?
Correct.
And where's your dad in this?
My dad's all the way on to the right.
Over here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Next to my grandmother.
Okay, and so this is the nuclear family
Yes.
that left Chandler to come to Scottsdale to have this sense of identity
Yes.
within the family. Great.
Now, just so you know, Dick, the shortest one in front, that's Uncle George, George song.
Okay.
Now, in the
born here.
1960s, he was a city manager and city attorney for the city of Scottsdale.
No, really?
Yeah.
Great, great. He has a certain brilliance that just leaps off the page here. Great.
Yeah, well, he signed in the first sewers, so, you know, it was an important thing.
Is that right?
Yes.
So it was this facility, and you turned it into what, in some ways, what it is today, and it matured over time. Let me ask you in general, how were you accepted? That's interesting to know. You left Chandler in part because the internal strife within different clans and perspectives within the Chinese population. Were you the only Asian American family in town?
Yes. Yes.
And how were you accepted? How did that go?
We had some difficult times, and I remember my dad would go to the market in Phoenix and in the truck have produce, boxes of produce, and as he unload them, he would set them in front of the store. Well, the people would come and just take them. And another factor which was frightening to me because I was young, people would take large boulders and throw them at the house, and I was afraid because I thought of being harmed.
Yes.
And of course, there's the verbal abuse. And being very young, you just didn't quite understand. Now, what did I do for them to call me names or make fun or try to imitate my language? But after a while, you took into consideration, perhaps they had no understanding, so you ignore it.
As you came to know those people and they came to know you over time and you established relationships, did that then?
They accepted
Yes.
us, you know.
Yes.
And then what we did, like in high school or education, we achieved higher than, you know, and then the achievement was higher than the rest of them, so what can they do? They couldn't, you know, like my sisters, they all, had outstanding in education in the high school and grammar school, and they look up to them. So it was okay. You know, the people in Scottsdale in those days, they had Yaquis, Indian, and all that. You know, we just take everything in stride. You know, we just
But you
mind
take it
our
in
own
stride, but it
business.
still hurt at the time.
Oh
Those
yeah,
things,
Well,
and
yeah.
when
I
you're
mean, we kept our own feelings.
And-
We
and,
didn't protest or anything.
young. Yeah.
And the comments would apply to other minority groups too, like the Hispanics. And I remember walking home from school, maybe every other day would get together and fight because they would call us names.
Well, hopefully we've come a long way since
Yes.
then, right? And we matured. Tell me about the store now. Was it a success right from the start?
Yes.
Well, what Uncle Martin had told me was that when they first started the store, they said, "Oh, look at these guys. They're putting the beans in baskets. Who's going to buy beans from baskets?" And you know, my grandfather did the same thing he did before. You know, he traded with the rest of the non-whites, and the white store, you know, just kept making fun of it. But he was successful. And
Yes.
So it had a clientele that started to divide itself around racial lines to a degree. I mean, keep in mind this is the 20s and early 30s. And
Well, he would have things that were more suited for the Indians, Indian beans and that type of thing, and the cuts of meat that they would use, like lard for the Hispanic making the tortillas, and he would have special Indian beans, right, John? And I remember they were in bins, and when customers came with little children, that was part of our job, was to watch the children because they would go along and mix the beans.
I think the most accomplished of my dad that was successful in the grocery business, that he learned their language.
Oh, yes.
You know, how to speak, you know, I want a pound of lard or I want a flour. He would, because most of those didn't speak any English at all.
Yeah.
So then he just, you know.
Yes, he could speak Apache, was it
Apache,
Apache from
yeah,
Fort McDowell, the Yaquis, and with the Pimas too,
And then the
besides
Spanish.
Spanish.
Yeah.
it's a pretty bright man.
Yes.
Very bright man, my goodness. And a real sense of how to serve the public, right?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what it was like living there. Where'd you go to school? Where did kids go to school in those days?
Well, we went to the La Loma,
Okay.
okay, and then after that, then we went to Scottsdale High. And then when I was a kid, the historical building was,
Wasn't that the Mexican
yeah,
school?
discriminated, but they just had the Spanish and the Indian
Yeah.
kids that went to school
Now that
there
in the
up-
Little Red Schoolhouse,
Yes.
the one
Was-
that's now the
Mhm.
Historical
Yes.
Society on the
Yeah.
mall.
That was
the
for
Hispanic people,
Yeah.
Now,
children would
did you
go.
guys go there too?
No, I didn't. Did you, John?
No, I think one of my two older sister went there at first, and I guess they were way ahead in achievement that they just transferred to a regular white school.
In
they
La
call
Loma,
it.
La Loma,
La Loma,
was
yeah.
the first and the only. Now that was probably grade
Grammar
school
school,
and
yeah.
middle school.
Yeah,
Then high school, Scottsdale High School was.
the only school, high
Yeah,
school.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us, John and Eva, a little bit about growing up in Scottsdale. Just in general, sort of things you did, the things you saw, the way family functioned or community functioned. What do you recall?
Well, go ahead.
I recall there was only one stop sign, not signal light, at Main and Scottsdale, and most of the roads were dirt road. And in the summertime, it was hot, but it did not seem as hot to me, being a child, because I would play outside without any shoes on. And I recall the Indians coming into town to shop, and there would be times that the horses would get loose and run away with the wagons.
Oh, wow.
And also, some of the Indians would take to alcohol and get drunk and fight and get hurt. My mom would run out there with her herbs to patch them up.
Uh-huh. So we helped each other, right?
Yes, yes.
What kind of games did kids play then?
Well, when we was kids, they were mostly Hispanic that lived around here, like behind the store was the barrio, but there were a lot of other kids too from Oklahoma. They came over to pick cotton, you know. So everybody had, and then they had all the outhouses around town. They didn't have plumbing at those days. Then during Halloween, we was kind of mean. We would knock them over. And anyway, one thing I remember is the Mexican people at like this church over here. They had that-
OLPH?
Yeah, no, the old one, no, or
Oh.
the symphony.
Yeah.
Okay, that
The
was
old
the mission.
OLPH.
Yeah, that was the mission church.
Uh-huh.
The priest would come over from Tempe, you know, and then the Mexican people would go. The priest, what would he do? He would ring the bell.
Right.
The person, the little Mexican one would go with their bandana and stuff and go to church. And then when I was a kid, I would go and play with their kids and all that, and they would have dirt floor, but it was spotless. They would water the floor down in the summertime to cool it off, but it was just clean as a whistle, and they would have nothing but all wooden stove out there, and then the outhouses would be in the back, and then sometimes they would have to get the water from some main hydrant in town, and that's the only water they would have, see? And they would dip it in the deal. I would sure like that because it sure tastes better than drinking it out of the faucet, you know. Little stuff like that.
But those are nice memories, aren't
Yeah,
they?
that was really nice about Scottsdale.
Well, we kind of made our own toys, more or less, like old wheels of tires, and you'd get a stick and kind of push it along,
Uh-huh.
or get cans, empty cans, and you stomp on them and walk on that, and they'd make lots of noise. And of course, using part of things in nature like mesquite leaves and making mud pies and using the beans to decorate like they were cakes or pies, that type of thing. So we more or less had to create our own toys.
You had to be a little more, no Nintendo.
Yes,
Yeah, that's-
we played kick the cans.
Can, yeah.
Red Rover, Red Rover.
Now you probably don't remember the Depression, but you remember World War II. How did that affect the area?
Oh, okay. I distinctly remember that because we had to wear buttons to say that we were Chinese instead of Japanese. And as you're well aware, they took the Japanese
Yeah.
people and relocated them.
Well, many of them were in camps right here in the
Yes.
vicinity around the Papago Buttes, right? In that general area?
No, that round Papago Buttes
Where
was
That
the
was the German.
the German
German.
German prisoner of war camp. The dividing line for Japanese was anyone who lived north of Grand could stay, but if you lived south of Grand, you were relocated.
Okay, and if you were Asian, you had to differentiate your ethnicity by some kind of identification?
Yes,
You know, kind of like the Jewish people had to wear stars, they had to wear badges.
yes.
Okay. Well, was that difficult? What was it like living through that time? One being Asian, and other than that, how did it impact the community? What was different here?
Well, it wasn't a big adjustment for me because the local people knew who we were, and so we knew we were accepted. It's just for outsiders that
Yeah, I
did not
see.
know us.
Yeah. So you're smiling, John. Do you remember? What do you remember about that time?
Well, when we was kids, we used to play war game with the Mexican kids and all that stuff.
Everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess any kid that grows up in that time played war games, right?
Yeah.
Well, certain
Sure.
items were rationed too, like
Yes.
paper items and remember,
Gasoline,
John?
yeah,
Yes.
the stamps.
Did it impact the store?
Well,
Yes, we had to limit
yeah.
the number of items that we could give to customers.
It was like food stamp. Yeah.
Now,
The government.
your family lived in this store until the 50s, and on that photo, it's actually there's a residential,
Yes,
nice
that-
little house right behind the
Yeah,
store.
that's the frame house. Although
And that's
Shake
right now
Wood.
where
J.
the
Chew and Company bar
the
is.
bar
there.
is
That's
and
where
the
Jason
nightclub.
Dad. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where Jason Dad.
It
saw
must have been unusual looking house maybe, because I recall artists would come and set up their easel across the street at the little red schoolhouse and draw or make paintings of that house.
Wouldn't it be nice to have one of those paintings? Wouldn't
It
be
would.
nice? Maybe
Yeah.
someone out there has one of those.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be nice? Because you can see, although poorly, really, in this black and white photo, that there's a sun porch of sorts back there and a fair amount of
Yeah.
trees and shade. That must have, when you sat on that side of the house looking east,
There was an irrigation ditch in
you
front there.
just saw
Yeah.
open space,
Yeah.
even though the store was behind you, huh? So,
Yeah.
well, so you moved out of there in the 50s. The family moved out of there. And then is that the time at which the house was converted to commercial?
Yeah, it was storage sitting empty for a while. But we moved to Miller. My dad built the house on Miller and Eaton School. So the family moved over there. By that time, most of the sister and brothers, they were all out of the house anyway. So, but basically, that was the nucleus of the family when they were in grammar school. And
That's where.
I think, Eva, you're the only one that commute back and forth to college, wasn't it, to
Yes.
ASU?
Yes.
But we all work at the store. You know, we didn't have time to, after we got back from school, we had a chore to do. And same way with the farmers and the kids that went to high school with us, you know, they didn't have time to play around after school. They had, you know, farms and ranches and stuff. They would have to work in their family deal. That's why they couldn't get in trouble or nothing.
You got a pretty good family work ethic, don't you?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Remember when it was cotton picking season
Yeah.
and they would have a large flatbed truck with all the cotton pickers come and we'd have to be in the store to help out.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
Shorty Perry, he was a cotton contractor. That's before the cotton machine automation came in. And he would pick up the Yaqui, and even what we call them Okie in those days, they all came in.
From
But-
Oklahoma?
Yeah, from Oklahoma and all over. Anyway, he used to live right behind the store, And I always remember he would wake up about 4 in the morning. It would just be colder than heck. And he would rev that motor up, and you could hear it for 5, 6 blocks. I said, well, Shorty's going to go and pick up the
workers.
the
huh?
workers, yeah.
In fact, there used to be a cotton gin here
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
too, and also a ice plant.
Well, that cotton gin, not too many years ago, was taken down.
I remember it.
And then
Yeah.
I remember that on 2nd Street, just,
it used to
just
be the-
south of 2nd
It used to
Street.
be the farmer market. They had
became
it
the farmer's
converted.
market.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, then in the 50s, you changed the store.
Yeah, late 50s, changed it because Circle K started coming in, and you told them and all that. And then most of the people that live around the surrounding of the store, they moved out. So
So you changed it to Mexican imports, and then the tourism started
Yeah.
to be a factor in your business, right? Obviously.
that's it. Yeah. I remember the first Parade de Sol. They call it the Fiesta of the Sun. Clark Gable was in that parade.
No kidding.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, Ford convertible going right down on Main Street.
So it didn't go down Scottsdale Road.
No, it was Main, just on Scottsdale Road. They started on Scottsdale Road going east on Main till you hit Miller, and that was it.
That was it.
Yeah.
Then the rodeo.
Oh, I recall too, on Indian school, they would have cattle drive. And I was very young, and I thought the people that was herding the cattle down the street were weird because of what they wore, chaps
Chap.
and spurs, and I haven't seen that type of clothing before.
I bet you had a lot of interesting people come into the store over
Oh,
the years.
yes.
A lot of interesting people. What other businesses and professions did the younger generation get into the family?
Oh, let's see. Uncle Joe is kind of a businessman. He has a insurance business and a liquor store, and did some real estate deals. And let's see, Dad started off in the as an insurance salesman, and then opened China Lil's just down the street from that picture when it was an adobe building. I think it was probably still around when you moved here, and that was an old opium den and saddle shop before he changed that to a restaurant. I remember working there lots of times. And
I
Uncle
had
Joe-
another sister that was a teacher too.
yeah,
Okay.
Auntie Lucy was a teacher.
Mhm.
And I don't know, did May and Mary?
Yeah, Mary, they graduated from college, Mary, and then May. Mary was a school teacher, and then George, and then he graduated from law school.
Yeah.
But I'm proud of all my nephew and nieces because a lot of them are doctors and pharmacists and CPA. Hell, they were a lot smarter than we were.
Well, that's what happens generation after
That's
generation.
it, yeah.
But you know, we've only got a minute left. This is a wonderful, I appreciate your time and your comments. This is a wonderful representation of, courage and resilience and intelligence and a family that represents, you put those roots down strong and put them down deep, and great branches grow.
Mm-hmm.
But Dick, I tell you what, I'm so glad my dad came to Scottsdale because Scottsdale sure been good to us.
Yes.
And we
I
sure
have fond-
appreciate it.
I have many fond memories of Scottsdale.
Yeah.
And the thing that I'm very proud of my father, he thought highly of education. He said, through education comes power. And so he educated all
Yeah.
8 of us
Yeah.
through college. And that made a big factor.
Through a lot of sacrifice and
Yes.
a lot of hard
Yeah.
work, and that's very nice, and you've been good to Scottsdale. That's the nature of the relationship.
Thank you.
And
thank
Jason,
you.
you've done some research
Yeah.
that brings to life a history, and maybe just quickly tell us how much more of that there is to come.
Well, I need to really sit down with my aunts and uncles and kind of enlarge the history, because most of it I was glad I got to spend some time with Uncle Martin and write about the old time when the family was moving from China. But I think we need to expand more of everybody I've shared the story with. They really have enjoyed it.
Well, I know that if there's people out there that watch this, they may actually want to get a hold of you and see some more of that and hear the whole story. So we thank you very much.
You're welcome.
for
It's
being
been
with
a
us today.
pleasure.
Thank you,
We
Eva and
enjoyed it.
John, and my friend
Thank
Jason.
you.
Thanks you.
Dick.
And we thank you very much for tuning in to this edition of Yesterdays. We look forward to seeing you the next time.